looks like we have another presentation from our friend Merlin, who's going to talk to us a little bit about how to start getting into pixel art. Everybody, please give it up for our friend Merlin, who's going to be talking to us about pixel art.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Merlin, and today I'm going to be talking about learning pixel art. I hope you find the title clever and funny. I spent a lot of time working on that name. So a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today. First of all, what is pixel art? Second, why should you use pixel art? And finally, some tips and tricks for the actual process of making pixel art. A quick introduction of myself. I've been with PIGSquad since 2013. I have over 5 years of experience making pixel art, and this is a hobby of mine. I am not a professional. Also, just going to throw this out there, all of the art you're going to see in this presentation was made by me. So why do I want to talk about pixel art? Well, first of all, I think that pixel art is fun and it's fun to make. I also think it's accessible. You don't need a special pen or tablet or expensive software to make pixel art. I think that learning to make art is helpful for making games, so if I can teach a few people to make pixel art today, hopefully that will also help them make games. And I'm hoping that my experience can apply to you in some way. I also just want to clear up any misconceptions about pixel art. So first of all, what is pixel art? Well, pixel art is a minimalist art style that originally was used in video games due to technical limitations. Images are composed of squares, aka pixels, which together form a cohesive picture known as a sprite. They often use a limited color palette, not always, but often. And pixel art is handcrafted, meaning that not all low-resolution images count as pixel art. You can't just shrink an image down and call that pixel art. It's something you have to create by hand. So why would you want to use pixel art in your game? Well, there are some pros and there's some cons, so let's go over those. The pros are, first of all, pixel art equals games, and I think this is actually the most important, which is that when people see pixel art, they immediately start thinking of video games, and that's a really good way to get people excited to play your game. Another factor is nostalgia. A lot of people in our generation grew up with games on the Super Nintendo or the Genesis, which used pixel art, and making a game with pixel art is a good way to harken them back to those good old days. Pixel art is easy to work with depending on your environment. Now, this does depend a lot on what you're using to make your game. But if you're using like a 2D program like Game Maker, I think pixel art's really easy to use. And in my opinion, it just looks good. Now, as for the cons, well, some people consider it overrated. That's just an opinion that some people have. Totally fine. Or overused. That's just how some people feel about it these days. There's also something to be said for nostalgia not being a good thing. Not everybody likes to feel nostalgia. Games that use pixel art don't sell for as much as 3D games, and there's a few reasons behind this, but it's just something to keep in mind that a 3D game typically sells for more than a pixel art game, and you're rarely going to find a pixel art game that sells for the full $60. It also struggles in 3D environments or games that have screens that change size a lot. And this is just what I mean by struggles is it can look a little out of place. Again, that's kind of more of an opinion-based standpoint, but just be aware that pixel art might look kind of funny in a 3D game or a game that doesn't adhere to a grid. A few misconceptions to clear up about pixel art. One is that pixel art is not a dead or dying art form. And the main reason for this is what I stated earlier, which is that pixel art and games are closely associated. So, people are always going to be making games with pixel art because that's where gaming got its roots. Pixel art is also not a low talent form of art. So, it's not like you can just pick it up and do it, and it's not something that just anyone can do. It's still something that requires practice and experience, and pixel artists are not cheaper to hire. It's not like it's not the budget option. It's just a different type of art style, and it requires design knowledge and experience just like any other art style. And while I do believe anyone can learn it, I don't believe that just anyone can do it. And I really want to clarify what I mean by that. You can't just hire someone off the street to do pixel art. You got to practice, and it takes experience and practice. And I believe anyone can learn that skill if they're dedicated to it. But just keep in mind that, it does require some work and some expertise. So let's talk about some actual tips and tricks for making pixel art. I'm just going to share some tips that I think are helpful if you're just starting out. And if you're not just starting out, maybe you'll learn something from this too. Maybe you'll pick up something that'll help you make your pixel art even better. First of all, you want to choose your software, and just choose a software that you're comfortable with, really. It could be Photoshop if that's something you have. It could be, a lot of people like Ace Sprite these days. My go-to is GraphicsScale. I just feel comfortable with it. I can't really explain to you why. It's just something I've gotten accustomed to, and I like the way it works. But that being said, you could use something like Microsoft Paint or iDraw, just whatever you feel like you're good at. That's what's the most important. And of course, it also has to be a software that lets you zoom in and place one pixel at a time. So let's talk about starting your drawing. When you get started, you're going to want to probably start off by making a shape or a stick figure. Now, the shape method is sometimes referred to as linear block-in, where you just kind of make the shape or the silhouette of your drawing. The other option, of course, is to make a wireframe, where you draw a stick figure. And while my example does show a humanoid figure, this applies to any kind of drawing. You can draw pretty much anything out of sticks or silhouettes. Next, you're going to want to add some color. When I add color, I typically add the darkest color to each section first. And by section, I mean the shirt, the pants, the shoes. I don't add lights and shadows yet, and maybe I'll add a few details just to show what it looks like. You can see I've added color to our example drawing. I've added blue for the trench coat. I've colored in the armor. And I've added a little bit of detail, but mostly I'm just trying to figure out where my colors are going to go. And here you can see them compared side by side. Next, you want to add lighting. So, you want to add your dark colors and your light colors. And when you're shading, you want to avoid what's called pillow shading on your pixel art, which is where you just kind of go in one pixel at a time from the edge and make each pixel after that a lighter color. The problem with this is, while it does look detailed, it doesn't look very realistic. You end up with a very flat-looking paper-like image. So what you need to do is color in the direction of your light source. In my case, my light source came from up. So you can see I've colored the top of my character's head with the light colors, also the shoulders and the top of the trench coat, and a little bit around the legs, just where I think the light would reach. And then finally, you're going to want to add details. Now, details meaning, the eyes, maybe parts of the weapons, the fingers. I added a belt buckle to my character. You also should consider adding highlights to your drawing. And highlights are the extra bright parts of your sprite that use a very low contrast, a very high contrast and high brightness color. Highlights don't typically follow lighting logic. So you can see, for example, in my drawing, I added a highlight around the chest, but probably light wouldn't actually be able to reach that area realistically. However, the point of a highlight is to feature areas of your sprite that you think are most important or that you want the eye to be drawn to. So, I wanted to feature the chest of my character and the arms, so I added highlights there. And I also wanted the hair to pop out a little more and the belt buckle. And you could say I added a little bit of highlights to my feet as well, because I just wanted these areas to pop out, and that's how I get a good shape and form that is easy to memorize and will draw in the eye when your player is viewing your sprite. Let's talk about making a palette. So if you're just getting started, start off with a really limited palette, like just 4 colors. And try and make a drawing with just 4 colors. You'll be surprised how much detail you can get out of just 4 colors. And when you're ready to add more color, it can be kind of intimidating trying to choose a palette. So what you could do is you could just download a palette. The 2 that I like are the DB16 and the DB32 palettes, and you can just get those on the internet. And most sprite programs support the importing of palettes. So that's just a good way to get some colors if you're not sure how to make your own colors, or you're just not sure what colors to decide on. When you are making your own palette, make sure you desaturate your dark colors and your light colors, and also shift the hue as the colors change in lightness. Don't just shift the brightness. You can see I've got an example of yellow here where it gets more green as it gets darker. This is just more natural looking, and it's a great way to make your drawing look dynamic and more detailed. Also, try to recycle existing colors when possible. That being said, avoid recycling colors from your character, because you want your player character to always look different from the surroundings and not blend in, so that the player can see it, of course. So when you're making lines, you can either make an aliased line or an anti-aliased line. Aliasing is making a line look rigid and crisp. It works best on small images and finer sprites. When you make a line that's aliased, you want to avoid what are called jaggies, which are pixels that make the line look a little bit crooked. You can see I've highlighted in red the jaggy pixels, and the way I fix them is with simple math. You just go down the curve here and you say 2 pixels per step on the diagonal, and then 2 pixels, and then as the curve starts to increase, you go 1 pixel and 1 pixel and 1 pixel until it starts to flatten out a little bit more, and you go back to 2 and then 3 and then maybe a lot of pixels, and then of course it'll start to decrease again as it curves some more. Then there's of course anti-aliasing, which is the process of making a line look soft and blurry. This works best for large images and splash art. To be honest, I don't actually anti-alias a lot because I just don't think it's necessary, but it does help a lot with splash art, and it'll just make your drawings look more detailed. When you're placing anti-alias pixels, you should place it around the corners of your curve, and it should go around, of course, the edges of, where the 2 colors meet. So you're going to want to pick a color that blends well between the 2 colors that are adjacent to each other. You'll notice I don't put anti-alias pixels around the top and sides and bottom of this circle because that part is already smooth. It's already perfectly straight on the grid, so I don't need any anti-alias pixels to make it look more smooth. You can see I've applied similar logic to the eyes and the face. I've added anti-alias pixels around the edges and the corners to make it look like it's blending in a little more. Let's talk about outlines. So you don't need to outline your sprites, but a lot of people like to do it because it helps the sprites pop and contrast against the background. There are a few ways to do outlines. One is single color. I've got a couple examples. You can see I've added a single pixel of white around this drawing of a bat, and then a single pixel of black around this drawing of a wolf. One tip when making an outline is to make a corner pixel as well around the finer points on your drawing. So any part where you're drawing, you would say, comes to a fine tip or a fine point, like these wings or the feet or the ears, consider adding a corner pixel there to make it look more accentuated and like it comes to a very fine point or tip at that point of the shape. You can see I've done that too on the wolf around the ears and on his nose because I thought it would be fun if he had a very accentuated nose. Next, you can make a light sensitive outline. I have an example skeleton here. You can see around this top of the skeleton's head, I've made an outline that's a lighter color versus the bottom of his head is a darker color because my light source comes from above. So anywhere that the light source would reach turns the outline a lighter color. And of course, the shadow areas have a darker outline color. Finally, I have what I call the inline outline, which is an oxymoron, but to explain what that means, I've got my example character again, and you can see he has an outline around the top of his head here, but it's actually part of the drawing. It's the same color as the rest of his palette, and it kind of blends in and forms the shape of the drawing itself. And I've done that in other places too, just to help define a contour around the important areas of my drawing and to help those areas stand out a bit more. Before I go, I just want to leave some general art tips that I find to be helpful when creating pixel art. I know I've got a bit of a wall of text here, so I'll go through it pretty quickly. First of all, make foreground images have high contrast, lots of bright colors and dark colors, and then your background images should have low contrast. So either just dark or just light colors. And they should be similar, maybe just use blues as your background color. And also you should be colorful. Or at least don't be afraid to be colorful. Pixel art is similar to cartooning, which means that people will rarely question colorful images like a purple wolf or a yellow trench coat or a blue tree. Those kinds of things are fun. So, of course it depends on your project, but don't be afraid to be colorful and play around with color. That being said, desaturate your colors because vibrant colors are hard on the eyes. If you have an image with a lot of vibrant colors, it can look kind of psychedelic, and people don't always like to look at that. So desaturate those colors to make them look a little more natural, especially on your bright and dark colors, meaning your lights and your shadows. When you're drawing, use a reference image. Of course, you don't want to plagiarize, but just keep a photograph or someone else's art nearby that you can reference to help you figure out where to make pixels on your own drawing. When you are making your drawing, detail the important areas more, like the face, the wings, or the weapon, or the chest. You don't have a lot of space to work with when you're making pixel art, so detail the important parts first and then build the rest of your drawing around that with less detail. I also suggest studying pixel art frequently because that's how you will pick up tricks from other people's art. And of course practice, because it's not going to just click overnight. And that being said, also make sure you practice correctly. Make sure you are practicing the correct techniques, because practice equals permanence. Finally, I'm going to leave you with some resources. These are just some good places if you're starting out on learning pixel art. Lowspec.com has a lot of great tutorials. Reddit is a good place to view some pixel art. They also have some good, helpful resources in the sidebar. Pedro Medeiros, he's one of my favorite pixel artists, and he often posts these tutorials that are just single image infographics that show you how to make certain types of pixel art. They're really genius, and I think he's a great resource, so definitely check him out. And finally, I've linked to a YouTuber named Mort, who I think has some really great video tutorials on pixel art. So if you like video tutorials, give him a look. And that's all I've got. So I want to thank you for having me and for watching my talent talk. And I wish you all the good luck, and I'll see you later.
Thank you, Merlin. That was great. Oh my god, yeah, that duck hunt dog was really, really fun at the very end. Those are awesome. I just had asked Merlin, I think one thing that is really important about his presentation that he ended with is practice, and the idea of keeping going with it. And I mean, I was very impressed by the number of technical terms in here and the number of ways to kind of look at pixel art from a very, very technical perspective. And he says he's been practicing more seriously for just about 5 years now, and he used to kind of sketch photos into pixel art. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the techniques Merlin has shared, aren't exactly the exact same thing for everyone. Like he said, even with something like outlines, you can go. You can have totally different approaches to those kinds of things. So yeah, I think practicing and finding what works for you, and again, he recommended so many different art tools as well and everything like that. I thought that was a really, really important thing to include. I always forget, mostly when I'm out of practice, that if I'm trying to do something like pickle art, when I'm trying to do something like pixel art, that's starting with a silhouette or a skeleton of what I'm going to eventually be drawing is one of the most important things to practice, and one of the things that at least makes me make my best results. So yeah, pickle art is good too. Pickles, always wonderful. Yeah, and I had just linked this in the chat, but this is the art set that Merlin had made for the horror PIGSquad Summer Slow Jams. So you can find that on itch. I had just linked it in the chat. Yeah, that was awesome. If anybody else has any questions for Merlin, he is in the chat. Oh yeah, and we also we talked about let me do the itch. That buff link was from a past PIGSquad Summer Slow Jams, and it's a multiplayer beat 'em up where you're just playing as ripped links. So another recommendation. Yeah, thank you so much, Merlin.